What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Daily Fantasy MMA podcast. My name is Brett Apley. Most of you guys know me as BB Bomb, and I am here with my man Josh at Stonewall MMA, back from the holidays. Hope you had a good Christmas, Josh. Thanks for doing this, and how you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. It's always a pleasure chopping it up with you. I'm doing all right. Christmas holiday pretty good. I mean, my wife and I are teachers, so we have a nice long break, which is good. We get to see like both sets of in-laws. We were talking beforehand how you were with like your family on Thanksgiving and then the girlfriend on Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
You know how that goes. But randomly in the car driving back from Pennsylvania yesterday, started to feel like really crappy and sick. And we went out with friends anyway. And that, like, by the end of the night, I was pretty close to being like violently ill. So I went to bed super early last night, feeling a little bit better, but still kind of like fragile, I guess. But other than that, pretty good. Ready to talk about the card.
Yeah, that's too bad. I hope, if you have to get ill during the show, feel free to step away. I will I will expect you to come back immediately afterward, but I'll try to hold my own. By the way, since you were on the show last time and you're talking about the light show that you were going to go for your birthday, did you ever end up doing that? How was it?
Yeah, it was good. It was good. The only like downside was my wife booked this like what was called a limo bus or like a limo van or something like that. Like limo seemed to be understood somehow. But when the guy came to pick us up, we got like a bunch of friends to go with us. It was like basically just a black 15-passenger van. It was like nothing limo about it at all.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it was fun. Like, yeah, the driver was really good and he was cool. We drove around for several hours with friends with like cases of beer, looking at all these like totally insane lights. I'd never really like seen these before, but people just like, if you go to like Walmart and just buy all the Christmas decorations, like all the lights in the entire aisle, that's what these people do. They just like put all the lights up, all of them. And so we just went around to all those different places. So it was fun. It was interesting.
Sounds cool.
Yeah.
So of course, everyone, we are here for UFC 219. I know that's what you all really care about. 10 fights. Cyborg Holly Holm is the main event. And before we jump in, you can find my premium content on RotoGrinders. There's a link in my Twitter. After we finish this podcast, I will start posting the breakdowns one by one. Rankings will be out today. So, and I'll also be writing a Contrarian Corner article for tomorrow. Josh, do you want to tell them where they can find your premium content?
Yeah, my stuff is with the break. I've been able to like kind of work ahead a little bit, and it is out. It's up, ready to go. Right now, it's at mma-today.com. It's at their DFS hub. So I think if you go to like their DraftKings tab, there's like a DFS hub there. The DFS sniper, Sean I have some stuff up there. I think he's working on something a little bit different this week. I'm not sure if his stuff is up yet or not, but mine is there right now. You can find it, get it, check it out.
Awesome. And for those asking, the plan is to do an alpha podcast tomorrow with Sun Tzu and Mark. So keep that in mind. Only 10 fights this week. Not ideal. Rivera, Lineker got canceled, but there are still huge tournaments. I believe I don't have the lobby open actually, but I know there's the new $10 tournament and the 152 max, which is kind of interesting. I like to see them. I like to see DraftKings change it up. So yeah, that $10 entry, $20K to first. That's still good money. The 152 max. There's the 333, the 33, all the usuals. Well over $200,000 up for grabs. Josh, how are you feeling about only 10 fights? There's no mid-range this week. Does that change your process at all? Are you playing more tournaments, cash games because of that, or same as usual? And just kind of what do you think is the slate overall?
I'll probably end up kind of playing it similar to what I normally do. I hate 10-fight slates just because, I mean, they're so hard to get a read on. There's less fights that you can, like, usually there's a handful of fights that I know I want just going to fade altogether. Some fighters and some fights that I really want to target heavily. And here, you don't really have as much of an opportunity to gain an edge by just fading these fights that you know are going to be not scoring highly or have a really good idea of that. So I think I have a pretty decent read on the fights at least, but figuring out how to play the card, I'm going to keep wrestling with that. And hopefully, like you said, hopefully there's not another fight that falls out. Like if we end up with 9 fights, this is going to be a total nightmare.
Yeah, that is my big concern. I really hope it does not come down to 9. I mean, I'm hoping that doesn't happen. Fingers crossed, but you never know. And yeah, like we mentioned, there is no mid range. You have to at least play 2 underdogs, even if you try to throw Alexijic in your lineup by himself. You still have to play another underdog. So it's a tough slate to navigate. And you know, that's why we're here. We'll talk about all these fights. I do think ownership is going to be very important this week because there's a condensed amount of options. I will probably be taking really strong stands on fighters, try and leverage myself against the field more than I normally do. I'll probably be taking some extra risks. I'll probably be leaving salary on the table. Those are things that I would encourage, especially if you're trying to play the $10 because there's 14,000 entries. If you play Magny and Makhmedov, like the 2, you know, most expensive underdogs, and just fill the rest of your lineup in, like even if you win, you're going to tie with 1,000 other people. So leaving salary on the table, I think it's a big one. Keeping ownership in mind is another big one. Let's jump into the fights. The first, well, now the only UFC Fight Pass prelim. Tim Elliott taking on Mark De La Rosa. De La Rosa making his UFC debut. Elliott minus 225 as the favorite. De La Rosa plus 185, the underdog on DraftKings. Elliott is 9K and De La Rosa is 7.2K. So, Josh, A, how do you see this fight going? And B, do you think Elliott is going to be super popular? Because the last time he was scheduled to fight, that's kind of the feeling that, like, a lot of people were saying, oh, Elliott's going to be super popular. It's Elliott, of course. I don't know that he's going to be like above 40% owned. There's a lot of fairly big names on this card. Khabib's only $100 above him. Cyborg's a few $100. Roundtree, Calvillo, those are all names I can see people looking toward. So I personally don't know if Elliott's going to be like chalk per se. So what do you think about that? And then do you think De La Rosa has any shot here?
Yeah, I think the fact that, I mean, he got pretty much embarrassed in his last fight might help depress his ownership a little bit, but I still think it'll be pretty popular considering what he did the fight before that when he just like went completely off. And De La Rosa doesn't really show me much that has me thinking that Elliott can't put up a pretty good score in the spot. De La Rosa looks to me like primarily a boxer. He's got pretty good hands. He's fast, throws in combination, but he doesn't look like he has a ton of power. And he's got some wrestling and grappling ability, but it doesn't look like he is like the same athlete or the same like level of scrambler or is as strong of a wrestler as Elliott. So I'm thinking that Elliott can just kind of have his way with him physically and be able to take him down. And as long as he doesn't get into like a straight boxing match, which we've never seen Elliott do, or run into like a big shot, I think he should be able to get takedowns, get passes. Even if he doesn't get a finish, I still think he's going to be able to score well. Do you kind of read the fight the same way?
Yeah, I do, and I'm very tentative to take these newcomers against veterans like a Tim Elliott, like De La Rosa. There were things I liked about him on tape. I'll dive in deeper in the premium breakdown, but he looks like a decent boxer. He looks like he has decent hand speed. I just don't know if he can out wrestle Tim Elliott, and you really have to be able to out wrestle or out scramble Elliott to beat him, because he's going to come after you. He's not just going to stand there and box for 15 minutes, like you said. And so, kind of like the manga fight, if Elliott has his way and can wrestle and can get the fight to the ground, I can see him landing a lot of takedowns, racking up passes. I think he has a strong chance to score highly. And if De La Rosa wins, I think it's very likely to be like an early finish. I just don't see him, controlling Elliott for 15 minutes, but maybe he lands something hard in the first minute, catches him in a submission. Those are kind of paths to victory for De La Rosa, in my opinion. So I think there's a good chance this fight scores highly overall. And I do think it's a strong fight to target overall on DraftKings, but my lean is certainly with Elliott. I expect him to get the win. Let's move on to the next fight. Louis Smolka taking on Mateus Nicolau. Nicolau is a pretty heavy favorite at this point, minus 240. Smolka the underdog, plus 200 on DraftKings. Nicolau 8.9K and Smolka 7.3K. I've seen a lot of people pretty much dismissing Smolka to have any shot at the win here. So do you think he has any shot, or is this clear sailing for Nicolau?
I mean, anytime you're kind of getting into a scrambly type of fight with Smolka, he's got a shot. He's just so aggressive. He's going to be looking for the finish almost the entire fight. I just think Nicolau makes a bad style matchup for him because he's a better wrestler. He's much more defensively sound, basically everywhere, and is a powerful counter striker. So, like, the problem with Nicolau is a lot of times is that he's just so inactive. His fight with John Moraga was like borderline unwatchable because they just hardly did anything for 15 minutes. But Smolka's not going to let him do that. Smolka's going to be getting in his face the whole time, which is just going to get him set up for easy takedowns. He's going to be trying to, scramble or sweep or submit from his back, which is just going to give Nicolau chances at passes, chances at submissions, chances at back takes. So I don't love Smolka just because he just has no thought for defense, and Nicolau is stronger and does have he's got a better pedigree, but also is just he's good at keeping himself safe all the time while still being effective offensively when he's given opportunities, and Smolka's going to give him lots of opportunities.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about this one because, first of all, Nicolau got popped after his win, and you never know how someone's going to come back after you saw it. But also, he's so counter-based that he really more than likely needs a finish to pay off his salary. And he's almost entirely based off, like I said, he's a counter fighter. So the good thing for him is that Smolka will likely be rushing at him and will likely give him those opportunities to counter. But I hear people saying oh man, Nicolau is just going to go out there and just rush him and take the fight to the ground. He's just such a good wrestler. Whereas he really doesn't look to wrestle. What he wants to do is to stand there and land counter shots. And if you engage him to the point where he has to use wrestling as a defense, then he will. But he's not going out there rushing, looking for takedowns. So I expect the same thing here. If Smolka runs at him and gives him the opportunity to land a takedown, then maybe he'll get a takedown. But I don't think Nicolau is going to go out there diving on takedowns. And so, part of me just doesn't want to put much stock or really invest much money in Nicolau because he's really only going to fight based on his opponent. So if Smolka does want to stand back and throw kicks and maybe doesn't rush at him, then I think it's going to be a boring fight, and I don't think Nicolau is going to pay off value at all. But if Smolka's desperate to get the takedown and just puts up constant pressure, then that will give Nicolau more opportunities to get the fight to the ground. Potentially he gets a submission. I'm willing to target Nicolau in GPP. I can see a path where he like lands a few takedowns and then just kind of outworks Smolka on the ground, maybe gets a late finish. I'm also willing to target Smolka in tournaments. I think he's a pretty strong leverage play because I think most people are just completely dismissing him. And I think, he really has his back against the wall here. He's lost 3 in a row. He really needs a win. He said he's stopped blacking out drinking during fight camps, which is nice. I don't think Smolka wins, but I think his ownership will be very low, and I think if he does win, it's going to be grappling based. So in large field tournaments, I'll be willing to target Smolka a bit, but my pick will still be Nicolau. Let's move on to the next one. Marvin Vettori taking on Omari Akhmedov. Vettori is the favorite, minus 230. Akhmedov, the underdog, plus 190. On DraftKings, Vettori 8.6K and Akhmedov 7.6K. Akhmedov, of course, coming off that win where he landed 6 takedowns against Al Hassan, got a big upset. Underdog here again. Do you think he can do the same thing here to Vettori?
No, I don't. I'm picking Vettori again in this spot because Ivanov is a powerful wrestler and power puncher, but he can be taken down himself. He doesn't have the best takedown defense. Vettori, I think, is a better grappler and scrambler, and Akhmedov is so hittable. He like just always ducks his head as he's just winging hooks inside. I think the bigger, longer Vettori is going to be able to tag him and outwork him on the mat. And I'm picking him to win by decision, but a late stoppage would not surprise me at all. I just think that Vettori he's younger, still improving. We've seen that. And he just does not accept bottom position or like a bad position on the mat ever. So that's one thing I really like about him, is that he is kind of relentless in the grappling. He's not going to let Akhmedov hold him down or grind him out against the cage. I don't know how many takedowns I see Vettori getting himself, but I do see him winning this fight. He's a guy I'm willing to target a little bit. He has, I think, one of the better finish props on the card. I think actually the third best. He's plus 145. So what do you think?
Yeah, I like Vettori here. I'm not high on Akhmedov. Unless Akhmedov is landing takedowns consistently, he's going to have a hard time winning fights, which he was able to do against Al Hassan. He does have power in his hands, but it's not round winning striking. It's maybe he lands something in a flurry and knocks you out. And I'm not going to pick him to do that. And I'm not going to pick him to land takedowns with any consistency on Vettori. I think Vettori has a higher pace. Akhmedov has shown to slow down and has, not the most durable guy. I see improvements out of Vettori. I don't know if he meets value. Like, I could definitely see a path where Vettori just keeps the fight standing, wins 3 rounds, and he scores 70 points or something like that. But I can also see him kind of breaking Akhmedov down and finishing the fight. So I think he's a fine, good tournament play. I'll definitely have some exposure to Vettori, and I'm probably not going to have much Akhmedov. There are just other fighters that I'd rather target on this card, I think. Let's move on to the next one, which I do think will have quite a bit of fantasy opportunity. Miles Jury taking on Rick Glenn. Jury, big favorite, but falling down to minus 210. Glenn, the underdog, plus 175. On DraftKings, Jury 8.8K and Glenn 7.4K. Speaking of recent upsets, Glenn, coming off that huge win, scored 134 points against Gavin Tucker. I have to imagine people are going to look at that and plug him in. Um, so is he one of the dogs you're looking at?
No, he's not. Not really. I think, yeah, we saw what he's capable of. We saw like his pace and his pressure and his power, um, and his cardio down the stretch against Tucker. Just being able to, I mean, after the first couple rounds, after the first round, really just be able to put on like a consistent beating on Tucker the entire fight. But I think the difference in this fight is Jury's wrestling and grappling. Jury wants to outfight a little bit too, kind of like Tucker. I mean, they have different styles on the feet, but um, if Glenn is trying to get into Jury's face and corral him and try to put hands on him, I think that's just going to give Jury the opportunity to take the fight to the ground. Jury's another guy who, kind of similar to Nicolau, isn't he's not a pressure fighter. He's not a guy who's like going to come like charging out at you and try to take you to the ground immediately. But that's where he does his best work. He's really, I mean, despite getting submitted by Oliveira and out worked on the mat by Cowboy, he's a strong wrestler, strong grappler, better than Glenn in that area. And so I do think that unless Glenn can like, kind of like he did against Tucker in their fight, like hurt him in the first round to kind of like change the complexion of the fight, I don't really see Glenn having a ton of success being able to reach Jury. And then I think he's going to kind of get, I don't know, not necessarily desperate, but I think Jury's going to get the fight to the ground and have his way there at some point.
Yeah, it's a tough fight for me to call, but this matchup with Jury is far different from the matchup against Gavin Tucker, and I think a lot of people are just thinking like, oh, Rick Glenn did that to Tucker. I think he can do that to Jury, but it's Glenn had a huge reach advantage in that fight, and Tucker was just not able to close distance at all. Couldn't take him down. So Glenn really just stood in front of him and threw volume. And by the first minute of the second round, Tucker was done. And at that point, the last 10 minutes of the fight, essentially, he was just a punching bag. I do not think Jury is going to fight similarly. Jury actually has a bit of a reach advantage himself. I think he can avoid getting hit much more than Tucker did. And what I mentioned going into that Tucker fight is like, yes, Glenn puts out a lot of offense, and that's what's great about him, but he absorbs nearly 5 significant strikes per minute. And that number may be a bit skewed, but it just goes to show like he's doesn't mind getting hit a lot to land punches. He's not very defensively sound anywhere. So I don't think, I don't think he's just going to land 150 significant strikes and Jury's going to land like 20 like Tucker did. I do not see that outcome. I think it could be more competitive on the feet. But if the fight played out like for 15 minutes on the feet, I guess I would still give Glenn the advantage just because of the volume he throws. Like you said, Jury does have the wrestling, and that's what concerns me here. I think he will get Glenn to the ground at some point, probably a couple times. It's just a question of, can he control him? Can he get enough top control time to win those rounds? And that's kind of what I'm struggling with. I think for the price, Glenn is a pretty solid tournament play, just because if he wins, I think he scores fairly highly. But he's not going to be like a primary target of mine, only because I think it's likely he gets taken down. I think Glenn will be very popular. And like the odds makers did open this as 3-1 in favor of Miles Jury. So there's a reason that Jury is a solid favorite. If Glenn was actually like the better fighter here, I think we'd see the line move a lot more. So it's a tough one for me to call. I do like Glenn a bit for his price, but I think that Jury probably gets the job done through his wrestling.
What do you think about Jury as a play?
I don't know. Like, what do you think his upside is in terms of like takedowns? Because I could see him landing 3 4 takedowns, maybe get a few passes. I don't think he has a great chance of finishing, and I don't think he has a great chance of landing, 100 significant strikes. So looking at his range, I probably am not going to have a ton of exposure to him because I would rather pay up to guys, Nicolau, Elliott, Khabib. I think those guys have a lot higher upside. And then below him, Dukisi and Vittori, I think, have equal, if not better, upside as well. So, like, in a vacuum, sure, I can see the potential for Jury to score well, but I don't think he's going to be a primary target of mine. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you see him? Do you think he has potential to earn the finish?
Yeah, I mean, I think he could. I'm not. Glenn's submission defense has so far shown to be pretty good. Like, he was getting owned by Evan Dunham, and spent a lot of that fight on his back, and was able to fend off a couple of really tight submissions. So I think that he's probably able to fend off the submissions here. But I think that we could kind of see. I think that would give Jury the opportunity for more passes, as he's just kind of like floating on top, hunting for submissions, is in like dominant positions, dropping significant strikes and getting passes and hunting for submissions. So I kind of like him. We'll get into some of the other guys at the top tier later, but he's the 6th or 7th most expensive fighter on the card. So you're not having to go like super high up for him. Probably like him more than Diakisi. I mean, like you said, Diakisi's got the same first round finish upside, or has got more first round finish upside. But I'd rather have Jury, honestly. I just think he's got a more consistent path to victory and just kind of fights to a game plan better.
That's fair. Jury, for the record, inside distance odds are plus 246. So not anything that I would jump on, but right. If you're looking to target Jury, it's because you think he's going to land several takedowns and earn those passes. Let's move on to the next fight. Khalil Roundtree Jr. taking on Michael Alexiejczuk. Roundtree is a big favorite. Where is he at? Minus 300. Alexiejczuk plus 250 as the underdog. And on DraftKings, this is the most lopsided fight. Roundtree 9.4K. Alexiejczuk 6.8K. Josh, my feeling here is it's a price play more than anything, because I think you're going to find few and far between a lot of people who think Alexiejczuk is going to go out there and win. The question for me is, even if Roundtree wins, even if he gets a knockout, like, how much exposure do we really want from him? Because he's not likely to grapple. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. I mean, I do like Roundtree to win here. I'm picking him to get a first round finish, but he doesn't throw at a high rate. He doesn't wrestle, like you said. So he's really one of those like first round finish or bust kind of plays. And I think he makes an interesting pivot off of Cyborg, but I don't really want to have we'll get to this when we get into Cyborg later. I don't really want to have a ton of exposure to either of them, because I think I don't like targeting those guys who are first round finish or bust. The fact that Roundtree he's the most expensive fighter on the card. He's got the best inside distance odds, but he's not a very good fighter. And I don't want to invest a ton of salary or a ton of money into these guys who you need a first round finish with, and otherwise they're not going to pay off, and they're just not that good. So I think Alexiejczuk is worse and a kind of a sloppy brawler and isn't UFC caliber. But he won his last fight in kind of a similar type of fight as what I see going on with Roundtree here. He got tagged and then just kind of ended up in a brawl and won. And he hit the other dude on the chin first, and that dude went down. So could that happen here? I think it could. I think Oleksiejczuk could make a, he's not someone I want to invest a ton of money in, but he would be, I think, a contrarian GBP play. I think, like you said, most people aren't giving him a shot to win here, and I think his chances to win are much better than his price is. So,
yeah, and this is why I say a lot of times that simply like breaking down a fight doesn't have much to do with DraftKings, because I'm probably picking Roundtree by first round knockout, but I'm probably gonna have more Oleksiejczuk than Roundtree on DraftKings. It's just, even if Roundtree goes out there and wins by first round knockout, he's landed so far at a significant strike rate of 1.4 per minute, doesn't land takedowns at all. So if he goes out there, gets a knockdown and a finish in 2 minutes, he's going to score between 105 to 110 points, potentially lower. But let's say he scores, 107. I don't know. I don't know if that's enough. Especially with Cyborg below him, Khabib below him, Elliott below him. Like, there are plenty of fighters who can score well, and it's so hard to pay up on this card that I think the majority of my lineups, the vast majority, are going to start with Khabib or below. It's and again, Cyborg's in a 5-round fight. Maybe Khalil scores 107 and still beats out Cyborg. But for Khalil to be on the optimal lineup, he has to pretty much outscore everyone, Tim Elliott and above. And the proper underdogs have to win so that you can fit him. And I just don't think the odds of that are very high, especially when I do think people will target Roundtree. I don't expect him to be 10% owned. He's coming off a couple of good knockouts. I think he'll be fairly popular. So my plan is to be significantly underweight on Roundtree. And even though I'm picking him to win quickly, I think Oleksiejczuk is a great tournament play, especially in the $10. I don't think he's going to be popular at all. He'll probably be one of the lowest owned fighters on the entire card. And, according to the odds, Roundtree is a, 3-1 favorite. So it's not like Oleksiejczuk is likely to win by any stretch of the imagination. But if you're making 10 lineups, you throw him on one and he does win, that lineup has a really strong chance to boost above, the vast majority of the field. So kind of like you said, Oleksiejczuk is a strong contrarian play. I'll be talking more about that in the article I write later. But even though I think Roundtree is going to win, my plan is to be underweight to the field on him on DraftKings. Let's move on to the main card, shall we? Carlos Condit taking on Neil Magny. Condit is a slight favorite, -160. Neil Magny, the underdog, +140. On DraftKings, this is as close to a mid-range fight as we get. Condit 8.5K and Magny 7.7K. This is a tough fight for me to call, especially because it's hard to judge where Condit is at mentally and physically. And just for that reason, I think Magny's a fairly strong play, but it's still hard for me to trust him. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking along the same lines. If this were 2 years ago, I would pick Condit in a heartbeat and be all in on playing him. I mean, I'm a huge fan of him, so I think I'm trying to make sure that my analysis or my thoughts on the fight aren't colored by that at all. So this isn't really a fight I have a ton of interest in. I think if Magny wins, it'll probably be because he can either wrestle effectively, because Condit does not have good takedown defense, but Magny isn't a great offensive wrestler. Or if Magny wins, I think it's because Condit has just kind of fallen off to the point that he just kind of gets outworked and outpointed by Magny, which I could see happening. But it's just hard for me to kind of trust Magny to impose his will on anybody who isn't deeply flawed or just mediocre. And I think Condit is, even if he's not at his peak anymore, is still a much more dangerous, much better fighter than Magny is basically everywhere. If the fight goes to the ground, Condit is much more dangerous. Although, I mean, if he's on his back, he's not going to be doing himself any favors there. So that kind of worries me a little bit. I think that more likely, I think the fight plays out on the feet, and Condit wins on points by just being, landing the more telling shots, maybe getting a finish. But it's kind of hard for me to trust either of these guys. So it's not a fight I'm dying to target.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, because I was going to say, if you do think Condit wins and you do think the fight plays out on the feet, I don't think it's very likely Condit wins by knockout. So I don't have a ton of interest in Condit. Maybe he lands like 100 significant strikes and scores 80 points. I guess that would do it, but what are his odds to finish? Condit inside the distance, plus 185. Not terrible. I would be surprised if he finished. He's not a Lorenz Larkin. Larkin really pressured Magny, throws really hard. Condit's more of a volume guy. And he's not a super pressure fighter like Larkin was, and Johnny Hendricks pressured Magny, RDA pressured Magny, Hector Lombard pressured him early. I am definitely willing to target Magny. I don't know if he wins, but there's enough concern with Condit where he's at mentally and physically that I'd be willing to target Magny just based on that. I mean, Condit's he's doing like a medical job. I forget exactly what he's in, like the like surgery field. I forget. I'll have to look that up after the show. But he's doing something medically related. He's also like starting a coffee company. I mean, he retired. We should talk about that. He retired after his loss against Damian Maia, and so he hasn't fought in quite a while. It's just, who knows where he's at mentally and physically. And then on top of that, he has horrendous takedown defense. That's his biggest weakness. He's decent off his back, and he's a good striker, but pretty much anyone who wants to get him to the ground can at some point. I don't know if Magny can to the point where he wins the fight, but I would probably expect Magny to get it to the ground at least once. He's very long. I think if he gets in close, he should be able to get Condit down. So a wrestling-based fighter, 7.7K. We need to target 2 underdogs. I don't know if Magny will win, but I'm absolutely willing to target him. I'm not expecting a finish from him, but unless Condit is just completely shot. Magny will be my preferred play in that matchup, though, just based on the price and based on the fact that I think he'll likely need to grapple to win. Let's move on to the next one. Cynthia Calvillo taking on Carla Esparza. Calvillo is a pretty big favorite here, minus 245. Esparza, the underdog, plus 205. On DraftKings, Calvillo, third most expensive, 9.2K. Esparza, 7K. I love Calvillo, but I don't know if this is the best matchup for her, from a real life or fantasy perspective. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the matchup.
Yeah, I agree completely. The out of these two, I would definitely rather play Esparza. I think the matchup is going to be pretty close, honestly. Yeah, Calvillo has shown to be a really gifted grappler and scrambler, but she isn't much of a wrestler. Her striking is not dangerous at all. Neither is Esparza's, honestly, though. That's kind of the one thing it's – well, I don't know about the one thing. Yeah, I guess it's probably the one thing that's making me hesitant to go kind of all in on Esparza for only 7K. Esparza is not a very exciting fighter or pick herself, but for only 7K, she's going to want to wrestle. She'll have to – I think – I think that Calvillo's like activity on the mat might give Esparza the opportunity to score more than she might otherwise. If Esparza has her way, she'll be able to like flurry occasionally with punches to help disguise her takedowns, get a takedown, and then just kind of set up in top position and ride out the round or as much of it as she can. And so she's not scoring a whole bunch of points. But Calvillo's not going to let her do that. I don't really think that Calvillo is going to be able to get Esparza down herself very easily. So it kind of comes down to, can Calvillo do enough on the mat to win rounds mostly from her back, or like really threaten Esparza, or land volume on the feet? So I think I'm picking Calvillo to win because I think she's just more active everywhere. But I do think it will be very close. I'm not confident that Calvillo will win. And I like Esparza more as a play because she's going to do it with wrestling if she wins. And you don't need her to score a ton with only 7K. If she gets a win, that's going to be enough. So,
yeah, I'm with you on pretty much everything. I think the only way Calvillo meets value in a tournament is if Esparza takes her down quickly and then Calvillo just like jumps on a submission. Otherwise, I don't see her meeting value. I don't think Calvillo is going to take Esparza down with any consistency. And on the flip side, I think Esparza can and probably will take Calvillo down. Calvillo is a very good scrambler, good submission grappler, but she's not a great wrestler. And like you said, what separates this fight in terms of just I'll pick Calvillo is because, Calvillo does enough on the ground that, like, I don't think Esparza is just going to take her down and then dominate from there. And then on the feet, Calvillo lands at a much higher rate. Even though her striking isn't effective, Esparza has essentially zero striking. So I think there's a good chance a lot of the fight could play out with Calvillo just dancing around, throwing ineffective volume that is still more effective than whatever Esparza is putting out. am more willing to play Esparza because she's a wrestler. She ain't getting the knockout here. If she wins, it's going to be by landing takedowns. And yeah, maybe it's super boring. She takes her down. Calvillo gets back up. She takes her down. That would be fine with me. From a DraftKings perspective, I'm in no way confident in Esparza, but for her price and for her path to victory, which I believe is wrestling based, she's in play for me. And I don't think she's going to be super popular. She's stuck between Barboza and Holm in the pricing tier, and I think both those fighters will be more popular than Esparza. So even though it's kind of hard to say like, oh, Esparza, that's a person you want to go in on tournaments because she has high upside, which I don't know is necessarily the case. I think she has a decent chance to win combined with her potential ownership that on this type of card, I would be willing to target her in tournaments. More so than I would be willing to target Calvillo at 9.2K. Let's move on to the next one. Dan Hooker taking on Mark Diakisi. Of course, this one was a FS1 prelim fight before Rivera Lineker was canceled. RIP. What do you think of Marlon Moraes, that situation, by the way? That was so weird where Moraes immediately called Jimmy Rivera out and was like, hey, like, let's fight, but like I can't make 135. And then Jimmy Rivera was like, okay, like we can fight at 138. And then Moraes said no. And he's like, okay, we can fight at 140. And Moraes said no again. And then finally he's like, okay, we can fight at 145. And then Moraes still said no. So talk about your stock going down. Anyway, Hooker Diakisi, that's what we're here for. Hopefully the Lineker Rivera fight will get rebooked. But Diakisi is the favorite, minus 185. Hooker the underdog, plus 160. Diakisi 8.7K and Hooker 7.5K. Let me get your thoughts on this one.
So this fight reminds me a little bit of the Abel Trujillo. Who did he just fight? Blanking on his name.
Who are we talking about?
Abel Trujillo and John McDessie. kind of reminds me a little bit of that fight, where Diakisi is kind of in the same spot as Trujillo. He's way more powerful, way more likely to get a first round finish. Can just knock your head off. Super flashy at times, but then at other times he's not really doing much of anything. He's getting wall installed and leg kicked by Jakar Close and loses a pretty clear-cut decision. So let me see what my actual pick here was. I think the most likely outcome is that Hooker is tough and has a long range and has gotten increasingly good at using it. Obviously, he's going to have to worry about weathering the storm early because Hooker is very hittable, and that's going to be a big problem, obviously, against Diakisi. So could he get knocked out in the first 30 seconds? Yeah, absolutely. That could definitely happen. But I don't think it's the most likely outcome here. I think the most likely outcome is that Diakisi kind of grinds out a decision win. He wins the first round just by being super explosive, kind of falls off a little bit, and then Hooker tries to make a comeback, and Diakisi is able to win one of the last 2 rounds, kind of like he did against Frankie Perez by getting a takedown and just riding out top position. But I think the next most likely outcome after that is that Hooker is able to steal a decision based on volume and better cardio and better output. So that's one of my thoughts here. Hooker is a guy I'm willing to target just because he throws out a lot of volume, and I just don't really trust Diakisi, kind of like with the Makdessi and Trujillo fight, like I mentioned earlier. I'd rather fade Diakisi, and if he gets the first round finish, well then, oh well. I guess I won't be on the winning lineup, but he's not a guy I want to invest heavily in.
Yeah, I hear you. There's a couple of differences between this one and the Makdessi Trujillo. First of all, Diakisi is much closer to the mid-range than Trujillo was, so I think he needs less to meet value. But unlike Trujillo Makdessi, I do think Diakisi can and will take Hooker down. Hooker just hasn't – I don't know. He hasn't really impressed me at all. He lands with volume. That's the one good thing about him. He's a fairly technical kickboxer. He throws a jab. That's great. But even in a lot of the fights that he's won, he's been losing them up until the point he won. And he submitted Margadiva. He was losing to Hatu Hiyoki before he landed a head kick. He knocked out Ian Entwistle. And the Pearson was a good win, but that fight was close as well. It's just, even on the feet, he keeps his hands at his waist and he tries to just defend with head movement. Jason Knight got him to the ground 4 times, took his back a bunch, and Maximo Blanco took him down 3 times. Yair Rodriguez took him down twice. Diakisi is a very good athlete, and we've seen him pick dudes up and slam them. I absolutely think Diakisi can get this fight to the ground if he wants to. But I don't know that he will want to, is kind of the thing. I think his game plan will still probably try to be to land something crazy in the first round and win by KO. I'm more willing to target Diakisi than you are. I think he could finish the fight, or he could grapple enough to the point that he meets value at, 8.7K. He's in that, that bubble with Vettori and Miles Jury, where one of them's probably going to end up on the winning lineup. Wouldn't you think? You can include Carlos Condit in that mix too. Those are the 4 cheapest fighters above the mid range. I think Diakisi could score well enough. Again, he would not be a primary tournament play of mine, but I expect him to win. And I think he very well could pay off the price. Hooker, I don't see Hooker landing takedowns. I don't see Hooker finishing the fight. And so it's really volume or bust for him. What's his price? 7.5K. I would consider Hooker in the sense that there's only 10 fights on this card. He's one of the better he has one of the better chances to win according to his odds. I think he's in certainly in play. But for me personally, he's not going to be one of the primary underdogs I target. I think Diakisi is a tough matchup for him. Let's move on to the co-main event. Probably the best fight on the card, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Hopefully will be fighting Edson Barboza, barring any weight cut issues. Khabib is a big favorite, minus 280. Barboza the underdog, plus 240. On DraftKings, Khabib 9.1K and Barboza 7.1K. So I think there's a lot of hot takes on this fight. Which way are you leaning?
I like Khabib in this spot, and he's going to be he's out of the top 4 or 5 highest priced fighters. He's the one I would want to have the most exposure to, because if he wins, he's going to be doing it with takedowns and passes and ground and pound, and I think that's something that he can definitely do here against Barboza. Barboza, obviously, I think I have to say this about Barboza is that he's far and away the best underdog on this card. He's, maybe like one of the top 3 or 4 best fighters on the card, period. He's a great fighter. He's going to have a big stand-up advantage on Khabib, but I think he's going to have to get an early finish, because otherwise he's going to get worn down in a hurry by Khabib. We've kind of seen that be Barboza's probably biggest problem, is that he can get he kind of wilts under pressure a little bit, gets worn down, gets tired, and like we've seen that in fights that are mostly played out on the feet. Like he's getting worn down by Tony Ferguson on the feet mostly. He's getting worn down by Beneil Dariush on the feet mostly. And yeah, he hit this insane flying knee knockout on Dariush, but I think he's probably going to need something similar here against Khabib in order to get the win. I have a hard time seeing him win rounds, because yes, he would win a pure striking battle. Yes, he's going to be winning the exchanges on the feet most likely. But I think Khabib is going to be moving forward, trying to get his hands on him as much as possible. Not giving Barboza space. B, tiring him out as Barboza frantically tries to circle away and land strikes as he does that. It all just kind of spells Barboza tiring out and Khabib eventually getting him down, getting his hands on him, and working him over on the mat, potentially finishing him in the second half of the fight. So that's kind of my read on it. Which way are you going on it?
I'm with you more or less. So we can assume that both fighters are going to be popular, right? And I also think it's a really good fight to target on both sides, because the winner of this fight will likely score very highly. If Barboza wins, it's going to be he's going to land a ton of strikes and probably get a knockout. If Khabib wins, he's going to land a lot of takedowns and probably passes as well, potentially a finish. Is this so? If you're picking Khabib, I know you don't think it's a lock, but would this be a fight that, knowing Khabib's going to be popular, you'll take an extreme stance on? Say Khabib is 45% or 40% owned. Would that be something where you would play closer to the field, or would you try to take an extreme stance on it? Say you're making 10 lineups.
Yeah, I think I'd probably be willing to take a more extreme stance on it, because I don't really like any other fighters above him more. So I would choose to be very underweight to basically everybody else above him, and kind of focus my highest priced fighters on him and maybe Elliott. So yeah, I think I'd be willing to take a more extreme stance on Khabib than the field.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of different ways you can go with this fight. I do absolutely think you should get exposure to this fight in the majority of your lineups, one way or the other. Maybe it doesn't have to be an all-in, but like I said, there's just a really strong chance that if Khabib wins, he's going to score well enough at 9.1K to end up on the optimal lineup. And if Barboza wins at 7.1K, I think there's a very, very strong chance, almost 100% chance, that he ends up on the optimal lineup. So This is going to be a very heavy fight for me. My lean is with Khabib. I think more than likely he gets the takedowns. Until I see him stuffed, it's going to be hard for me to pick against him. And Barboza really hasn't fought a wrestler of the caliber of Khabib. Yes, like Edson Barboza took down Tony Ferguson, but that doesn't mean he's going to defend takedowns against Khabib. I do think it could be close. I certainly think Barboza is in the fight, and I will have some exposure. I'll probably play it closer to the field. I do think taking an extreme stance is a decent play if you want leverage in this spot, because like I said, both fighters are going to be expensive. But personally, I don't want to go so heavy on Khabib that I don't have any exposure to Barboza, because I think Barboza is a live dog here. However, I think Khabib gets the takedowns. I think he probably gets the win. So he's my preferred play. Like I said, it's one of my favorite fights overall on the card to target. And yeah, let's move on to the main event. Chris Cyborg taking on Holly Holm. Cyborg now the biggest favorite on the card, minus 360. Holly Holm plus 325 as the underdog. On DraftKings, Cyborg 9.3K and Holm 6.9K. So does Holm have any shot here against Cyborg?
I think she does, yeah. But it's not going to be like the same kind of shot she had against Rousey. Like, I mean, virtually nobody saw that fight coming. But if you're expecting, Holm, like she's capable of this, like, could she beat Cyborg? Could she get this incredible upset again? Yeah, I think she could, but I think it would most likely look very different. She would have to win on volume and stay away from Cyborg as much as possible, because Cyborg hits way harder and is much more physical. So, Holm getting some kind of like freakish head kick knockout again. That's basically the only way the Holm can finish fights is with the head kick knockout. And is that possible here? I guess, yeah. But I think the more likely, I'm kind of interested to hear your take on whether or not, how you think Holm approaches this fight. Is she going to be? I just kind of see her being afraid to engage and just being on her bike so much that she's has a hard time getting off effective offense. Like, even if she does land more strikes, that they just don't have anything on them, and Cyborg wins rounds anyway. So I'm picking Cyborg to win. I think she'll end up getting a finish in the second half of the fight sometime, when she finally is able to get a hold of Holm. We've seen kind of Cyborg be more and more patient recently. She's not like the berserker going out to just like club you to death immediately. And Holm's going to look, again, like I said, try to jab and try to stay away as much as possible, especially early. So I think the fight could go later. We have seen Holm have like pretty solid takedown defense against like the first initial shot. She's strong. So unless like Cyborg can get like a body lock and just like drag her to the mat, I don't know that she's going to have an easy time getting the fight to the ground. I think that's probably. Do you see Cyborg paying off here? I mean, I think that she's going to end up being really popular because it's Cyborg and she's not like insanely expensive. She's not 9,600. So I think she'll still end up being popular, but I just don't really see her paying off consistently.
Yeah, it's a tough fight to read from that perspective. I just do not like Holm's fighting style at all. Even if she does like engage, her striking is not effective. Like, she isn't good leading. She, really doesn't hit hard at all, except for when she lands head kicks. She's just not an effective MMA striker. So when you have someone like Ronda Rousey who runs at you and like runs into your hands, that's great. When you have someone like Bethe Correia who's just stuck at head kicking distance, that works too for her. And even someone like Miesha Tate, who really needed the takedown but couldn't like close the distance with her striking, Holm could just dance around and strike. Those are the type of bouts she excels in. So I think if Cyborg fights in a like desperate mindset where she kind of just chases her around, I think that's when Holm will look her best. But other than that, I don't really see where Holm, even if Holm like has her fight, it's tough for her to like dominate fights. She doesn't wrestle, and it's hard for her to land damage. I think like the one of the biggest potential factors in her favor is that it's 5 rounds. Maybe she can find a way to get Cyborg tired, and win rounds 4 and 5 because Cyborg just can't close distance effectively anymore. But that's just a stretch here. What's concerning me is that I think a lot of people are saying like, oh, Holm is a terrible, she's not good on the ground. Cyborg is going to look to land takedowns and she'll get a quick finish. And I just don't know if that's going to be the case. I still think she's going to look to try and land a knockout. I think she'd be fine in the clinch. And Holm is strong enough in the clinch. She's a big girl. She's decent enough defensively that I don't think Cyborg's just going to have her way with her in the wrestling department. So, yeah, I think the best way for Cyborg to pay off her value would be to get the fight down quickly and like land ground and pound and earn a submission in the first round. But I think more than likely the fight will play out in the feet for the majority. And I still think Cyborg will win because she's the more effective striker. She hits harder. So here's to sum up here's like how I would read it from a DraftKings perspective. I think the smaller the field, the less amount of entrants in the tournament, the more I think Cyborg's in play because she still has 5 rounds to play with. She still is going to strike at a high rate. She'll still probably get a takedown or two and probably get a finish. So I think she's a very safe play. She's the heaviest favorite on the card, has a bit of odds value compared to her price. Cash game, she's fine. 20-person tournament, she's fine. But the higher you go, like if you're playing the $10 and you have to beat out 14,000 people, I don't know if she's as good of a play. I'd still probably prefer her over Roundtree because I think she has more opportunities to get to that like 110-point mark than Roundtree does. But again, I still would probably base the majority of my lineups below Cyborg just because it's hard to pay up for her. So especially at her 35+% ownership in the $10, I don't think she's a great play there. But in head-to-head games, in 100-person tournaments even, I think Cyborg's a pretty good play just based on her safety. I do not see Holm finishing the fight quickly. And as far as Holm in tournaments, I don't know how much you touched on that, but I like her price is good, but she doesn't wrestle. Her inside distance line is like plus 1,100. And I do think she's going to be popular. I've already heard a bunch of people on her. So I'll definitely be underweight. The question is like, do I fade her completely? What do you think about that? If you're making like 10 lineups, or do you think she's going to be popular?
No, I mean, if you've been hearing people think that she can win, I think that that's enough. That's going to be enough ownership that, or more so than I would want. So yeah, I guess your question is the most salient one. Is it you want to be just underweight or you want to fade her completely? I think in tournaments, I would probably look to fade her. I'd rather have basically everyone else in that bottom tier, Alexei Shuk, Esparza, Barboza, than Holm.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. And I like I said, I do think she's going to be popular. I think the public perception of this fight is closer than the odds suggest. Like, just as an example, I was at my girlfriend's holiday party, and and someone came up to me who knew I, do MMA stuff, and they're like, "Oh man, I can't wait for like Holm Cyborg," and I like Holm's going to crush her, and I was like, "Oh well." Holm's actually a pretty big underdog, and they're like, No, I don't think so. Like I think she's definitely going to win. Maybe she does win, but I kind of think the public perception is still Holly Holm knocked out Ronda Rousey, Cyborg's this girl, and the fights maybe pick them, or they do think Holly Holm's going to win, and certainly for the price, I think that will put a lot of people on Holm. So, like you said, I think Holm's fine for cash games, but in tournaments, I think Esparza, Barboza have better shots to win and have higher upside, and I think Alexiejczyk for his ownership is a better large field tournament play. So I probably will not have much exposure to Holm, which is kind of scary, not going into this card, not heavily targeting the main event. But
how about the infamous Cash Stack? Could you get some exposure to her that way? Or are you thinking you're going that route or not?
Yeah, I think you could, only because I think Holm's a better, unless you really need the extra $100. I think Holm is a better cash game play than Alexiejczyk, because I expect Holm to last a bit and land a handful of strikes. I think Esparza is a decent cash punt, and I probably wouldn't play Barboza in cash because there's a chance he could just spend his entire fight, the entire fight on his back. So, obviously, Cyborg's in play for cash games. I think Holm's in play for cash games too. Provides you savings. And yeah, I think whether you stack or not, targeting Holm in small field tournaments / cash games is probably the route I will go to get my exposure to her. And again, if this was a case where I thought Holm was going to be 15% owned, then I would say that's way too low. She has some chance to win. 50% owned, target her in the $10, but I think she'll be fairly high owned because there's not a lot of big names. She's in the main event. People know her, and she's super cheap. There's only 10 fights. It felt like 12. Any other thoughts on this card before we take off?
No, I think we hit on most of the things I wanted to talk about. We talked about who we like in that bottom tier and who we like most in the top tier. So yeah, just do whatever kind of like rain dance you have to do to make sure that Khabib makes weight. So we still have 10 fights on this thing Saturday.
Yeah, that would be very disappointing if he did not make weight. In chat, Nicole Carter asked, can Holm score enough in a loss and be on the winning lineup? I mean, it's possible, but I personally, like, there are some cards where you think, man, none of these fighters are going to win, so I'll target this one. She can do well enough in a loss. I probably wouldn't go into tournaments with that kind of mindset, especially for Holly Holm. She only lands 3 significant strikes per minute. Like, could she end up on the winning lineup scoring 30 to 35 points? Yes, but I mean, you're really still going to most likely need her to win in order to take down a tournament. So it's possible. I wouldn't go into tournaments with that mindset. Josh, thanks for joining me. I'll do the rain dance after we get off air. Hopefully everyone makes weight. Like I said, my breakdowns will be up. I'll start posting them in the next 30 minutes or so. So check out my MMA premium content on Roto Grinders. You can check out Josh's premium content. Follow him on Twitter at Stonewall MMA. You can follow me at Brett Apley, _T_P. And then we got a break, a 1 week break, and we're back January 14th for UFC. What is that? St. Louis, I believe.
Yeah.
Duho Choi taking on Jeremy Stevens. And then the big one will be January 20th, UFC 220. Miocic, Ngannou, and Cormier Ozdemir. But before we go, Miocic, Ngannou, you got to read on that one?
God. I'm definitely looking forward to it. God, I mean, just in the way Ngannou hits people, I just have a hard time imagining anybody being able to stay conscious against him for long. Miocic, I think, is going to have to come out and wrestle right away, like maybe hopefully tire him out or something. I don't know. Do you have a thought on it? And do you have a hot take that Miocic is going to box his face off or what?
I'll have to do my full tape study, but like these are generally the type of fights where I lean on the more well-rounded guy, the more experienced guy. So like I probably expect to end my tape study picking Miocic, but it's just one of those fights where Ngannou lands one punch in the first round and could knock Miocic's head clean out of the octagon. So I won't be shocked either way, but I'm definitely looking forward to that one. That should be a great card. Hopefully a lot of big prizes for that one. Like I said, a lot of big prizes for this week too. Good luck with your lineups, everyone. Hopefully we give you some good analysis. Follow us on Twitter, and we will be back in January. Happy New Year. Bye, everybody.
Peace.